conquer another man, but the one who conquers himself is the true warrior. The man you are about to meet is one of America's truest warriors. Having started with nothing and with only an 8th grade education, Joe Land has gone on to earn staggering sums of money. He's overcome a lifetime of being overweight and out of shape and is now 75 pounds thinner and physically fit. And after many personal disappointments, he set out to find and found the true secret to being successful and happy at the same time.
And a lot of success that I've had in the last 4 months is due to this man. He's our keynote speaker today. Please give a warm welcome to Joe Land.
Joe Land is famous as one of this country's most powerful and gifted speakers. Yet he's rarely appeared in public since 1988 when he retired from business. Joe Land is someone you may not have known about until tonight. And he's someone who you will never forget. Joe Land is the very definition of a self-made man. At age 23, with money he had borrowed, he opened a small hamburger stand in his hometown of Clovis, New Mexico. 5 years later, he entered the real estate business. He becomes a broker investor who has some new and timely ideas. His ideas prove to be successful, and it is through these teachings that Joe Land discovers his greatest talent.
Ladies and gentlemen, the finest real estate speaker in the United States, Joe Land.
In 1986, Joe Land was favorably profiled in this 60-minute segment on real estate seminars. Over the next few years, the group of companies which Joe Land had built from scratch would earn him as much as $10 million in a single year. He became famous for his live speaking engagements and for his pioneering direct response television programs.
And changing your eating habits.
Mr. Land, I owe you my life. I feel...
Now, don't make me cry. You'll...
Then, in 1989, at the age of 44, at the height of his career, Joe Land did something quite remarkable. He sold his companies and retired. He walked away and began a new life. And at first, he started doing many of the things you'd expect a multimillionaire to do. He purchased this classic yacht, named it Destiny, and in the Joe Land I Can Do It style, decided to serve as his own captain. He decided to drive race cars, and sure enough, experienced the thrill of burning rubber at 200 miles per hour. Finally, Joe Land bought this southern estate in beautiful plantation country. He named it Providence and shaped it into a garden retreat. But then, he began looking for a new direction in his life. Unhappy with his sole pursuit of pleasure, Joe began to learn about fulfillment. And as a result, he became totally committed to what he now believes is the most rewarding of all human achievements. And that is serving others. Today, Joe Land speaks to you as the founder and chairman of the Joe Land Foundation. The Joe Land Foundation is a non-profit corporation whose mission is to serve the needs of prisoners and school children and to promote the philosophy of serving our fellow man. And to be an example, Joe serves without a salary or any other type of compensation. Tonight, you will hear Joe Land speak about his own life of self-discovery, about how to achieve success in business, how to become physically fit, and how to end addictive behaviors like smoking, drinking, and overeating. Tonight, you will hear exactly how success and happiness can take root and grow together in your life. How you can become a true warrior and gain control over yourself. It's what Joe Land calls the ultimate power. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Joe Land.
Thank you. Oh, wow. What a wonderful reception. Thank you, Dallas. Well, I so much appreciate being here. It's such an honor to speak at Brian's event. I know that I'm talking to the absolute cream of the crop in the Metroplex area. And besides all that, one of the really neat things about speaking in Dallas is that this is one of the few places in the world that I can go and I don't talk funny. I do want to tell you, though, that introduction, folks, that thing was slightly misleading. I was watching that thing, and I couldn't help but think about the old boy that was introduced to speak at a banquet one time, and they introduced him as somebody that was a guy that made $1 million in the oil business in Texas. And he got up there and he said, you know, before I start my talk tonight, I ought to tell you that was just slightly misleading. It wasn't exactly Texas. It was across the border a few miles into Oklahoma. Just wanted to let you know that. I know that's technical, but it wasn't Texas. And he said well, to tell you the truth, it wasn't even the oil business. It was a service station. Sold oil. And I may as well go ahead and tell you it wasn't even me. It was my uncle. Close uncle. And it wasn't quite $1 million. It was more like 100,000, I think. And he didn't make it. He lost it. Now, my introduction is not quite that misleading, but I want you to know that I am not standing up here tonight somebody that's telling you that I'm smart enough that I made $10 million in a year. Folks, I don't know how I did that. And so please don't think I'm going to try to teach you how to make that much money, because the fact of the matter is I just happen to be the right guy standing at the right place at the right time. And I had another one of the thousands of crazy ideas that I've had in my life to make money, and lit the fuse on that one, and it blew up all over me and blew money all over me, and it was just unbelievable. And I tell you what, though, the fact that it did happen to me is an ongoing testimonial that it could happen to anybody. In fact, if you want to do that, let me kind of tell you what it's going to be like. Let me spend just a minute or two telling you what 1988 was like. It was wonderful until tax time. That's a little emotional for me to talk about. I paid $2.4 million in personal income tax in 1988. I had already paid about $400,000 in quarterly estimates, and I wanted to hang on to that other $2 million as long as I possibly could, because it was paying me $160,000 a year in interest, $450 a day. You don't decide when to send your money in by your calendar. With a deal like that, you use your watch to determine whether it's time to send it in or not. And that fateful day got there, and I had to. Never forget it, April 15th, 1989. Joe Land, from Dimmitt, Texas, playing with real dollars, gritted my teeth and signed a real check for $2,086,000 something. And I just couldn't resist it. I put a little note in there with it, a little handwritten note. Said, please don't spend this all in one place. I don't know whether that did any good or not, but I put that in with that big old fat tax return, and I didn't even trust anybody to take that down to the mailbox. Took it myself. Slid that thing into the slot. That was not hard. Letting go of it was hard. But I gritted my teeth for the second time that day and let go, and I swear I heard a sound like, and my $2 million was gone right into that federal bureaucracy, and it was a long, long walk back to the office. But I did get some special treatment from the Internal Revenue Service as a result of sending them all that money, and I want you to know if you send them a lot of money, they will treat you special. It was about a year before they wrote to me, and all those folks are busy up there. And I could tell it wasn't just the forms for next year. You know, we've all got those and recognize them. It was a letter to Mr. Joe Land from the Internal Revenue Service. And I thought, all right, you know, they've got some kind of heavy depositor frequent flyer program up there, and I'm going to get extra bonuses, you know, for next year or something. And so I opened this thing up feeling all patriotic that I had made that big a contribution to my country, and guess what it said? Anybody want to guess? Audit. That's exactly what it said. How did you know that? They sent me a list of stuff they wanted me to bring to them, 3 pages long, that amounted to every piece of paper I owned in 1988. And 18 months and $30,000 in accounting fees later, I got a letter of no change on my 1988 personal income tax return. And I thought I was going to get a chance to get part of that back. As you saw in that little video, I have a foundation, and I go and speak to corporations and what have you, and I charge them a fee, or my foundation does, and that money goes into the foundation. And I have a speaker bureau in Kansas City that books me into some things, and they called me one day Hadn't been too terribly long ago, and they said, Joe, we've got you booked into a meeting in Washington, D.C., and they cleared the date, and I was free, and so I said, all right, who am I speaking to? And they said, well, we want you to talk to about 125 Internal Revenue Service managers. Now, I'm going to get it 45 minutes, and they're going to pay me to stand up there and say anything I want to say. And so I figure if anybody ought to have to sit through this story, it would be them. And if anybody could understand the significance of a letter of no change on a $10 million return, it'd be them. So I planned, unfortunately, they have come to their senses and canceled that meeting. I didn't get a chance to do that. But I had it really planned. In fact, I worked harder on that speech than most I've ever made. I was going to stand up there on the stage, whether they liked it or not, tell them my story of my $10 million a year, my letter of no change, and then, whether they liked it or not, I was going to, right there in front of them, take a bow. I'm not real sure which direction I was going to be facing when I... Well, listen, that's the end of the story, and I'm sure you'd a whole lot rather hear the beginning of it. It all started in 1965 when I got out of the Navy, and all I had was an absolute and total burning desire to be a multimillionaire by the time I was 35. It consumed my life. It's all I thought about. But I found out as I tried to reach that goal in some fashion of starting with nothing and building this fortune, that I had a major challenge in front of me, and it was the same one that kept popping up over and over and over again. In fact, it wasn't just a challenge, it was an enemy. I had this enemy keeping me from doing the things that I knew I needed to do consistently, day after day after day after day, in order to reach my goal. And it kept making me do a bunch of things that were counterproductive and were taking me away from my goal. You see, my enemy was me. I couldn't gain what I came to call the ultimate power. I didn't have control over me. Now, let me see if I can't say this in a way that you folks would relate to it. In fact, let me see if I can't do a little exercise here. And my objective is to get every hand in the room, in the air. And here are the rules. If I ask a question that you can answer yes to, then you got to put your hand up. And then once you get your hand up, you got to leave it up, even if all the answers of the rest of the questions are no. Let's go ahead and get most of them up to start with. How many of you in here would like to lose some weight? Can I see your hand? Didn't know I was going to ask a trick question, did you? Okay, now you got to leave them up there. Lord, I'm not sure there are any still down. Well, let's go through the motions of getting the rest of them up. Anybody in here like to quit smoking? Can I see a hand or two? Good. I saw a hand or two go up there. Anybody like to be able to stop procrastinating quite as much as you do and get more done? I got people with two hands up now. Anybody in here like to gain better control of a negative emotion that comes and takes you over and has you do some things you wish you hadn't done, like anger and bitterness and hatred and fear? Good. I think I got them all up. You can put them down. What do all those things have in common? They're all things that you and only you have total control over. 80% of you said you wanted to lose some weight. Well, we all know how to lose weight. All you have to do is exercise more and eat less. That's it. There's no mystery at all. Well, I just wonder which of those diets will work. Well, all the diets will work. It's you that doesn't work. I mean, who's in charge of what goes in your mouth? When is the last time somebody broke in your house, got in your refrigerator in the middle of the night, and woke you up cramming a bunch of food in your mouth? You know, we eat too much, we drink too much, we still procrastinate. Procrastination, now, there's the king of the self-imposed limitations. Can you imagine explaining procrastination to a Martian? Well, what is this? Well, okay, it's where there's something that you want to do. You know what to do? Oh, yeah, I know what. Can you do it? Oh, yeah, I can do it. Well, then why don't you do it? I don't know. I just can't get myself to go do it. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so, you know, we go around lacking a power that I call the ultimate power. See, we all salespeople go to seminars to learn how to gain power and control over your customer. You don't need that. Can't have it anyway. We go to management meetings and we learn how to gain power and control over our employees. Forget that. The only power, ladies and gentlemen, you will ever need to have, do, or be anything you want is the power over you. There is the ultimate human challenge, ladies and gentlemen. And I learned a long time ago that there were two of me. You see, there was a side of me made up of my emotions and my desires and my feelings. And I found out that those emotions and those desires and those feelings made wonderful servants, but they make terrible masters. On the other hand, I've got a side of me that's logical, that's rational, that's my better judgment. You see, this side of me is a short-term thinker. In fact, this side of me is really only interested in one time, and that is right now. But this side of me, the rational, logical Joe Land, is a long-term thinker. This is the one who realizes that if I'll just do some things right now that I don't particularly want to do because they're not much fun, while keeping myself from doing the things that everybody else is doing, then I can have some things off in the future that most folks just don't have. In other words, if you can find a way to get yourself to do some things that half of you doesn't want to do, then you will have engaged in the process we call maturing and growing up, and people who can control themselves can have just about anything they want to have because they can cause themselves to do anything they want to do. And of course, when you accomplish that, you have become someone you've never been. It's a maturing process. And I learned a long time ago that if I would learn some techniques that would hurry the maturing process along, then I could get wherever I wanted to go. And I think maybe the difference between these two parts that exist within all of us is most evident in a little routine I saw on one of these daytime television talk shows. You know, like Oprah and Geraldo. Can you imagine why those people would appear on national television and say the things they say about their life? Do they just slip into some kind of twilight zone and forget they're going to have to go back to work Monday morning? Is that what happens to them? If I went on one of those shows and said something like that to a national television audience, I would have to go get plastic surgery the next time. You know, I'd have to get into one of those government ID witness programs where they hide you in a little insignificant neighborhood. But I saw one time that, in my opinion, took the cake. And a line came out of that I'll never forget. Here was the situation. There was this lady and her husband and her sister. And what had happened here that deserved national discussion? You saw it too, huh? The wife had caught the husband messing around with her sister. Now, this obviously was not the smartest man in the world to begin with, but his sleeping with his wife's sister was not nearly as stupid as showing up on national television to talk about it. That audience chewed him up and spit him out. And at one point, you know, he had tried to look for a hole in the stage to get in and couldn't find one. And they had this female psychologist there, this lady psychologist, and she was in the first couple of rows. And her job, of course, was to make psychological sense out of all this. Got to have one of those in the show. And at one point, after she'd been introduced and made a comment or two, somebody from the audience said, "Why did you do that in the first place?" This psychologist said, "Because man is a sexual animal. But, sir, man is also a civilized animal. And at some point, that part of you that's civilized needs to grow strong enough to overcome and control that part of you that's sexual." And then she said something that stabbed every man I have ever known directly in our hearts. That woman opened her mouth and said, "Men, they develop a plan and follow that plan. Boys, they just do what feels good." She could have used anything on us but the truth. And you know, I've thought about that a lot of times every time I wanted to do something that was fun but not real productive, kind of counterproductive toward what I told myself yesterday I wanted to do and what direction I want to move in my life. There are some times you just have to choose between feeling good and going for your long-term goals. And so what I want to talk to you about tonight is some simple little techniques that I found very, very effective in accomplishing just that. Now, as I give you examples, and I'm going to give you a real-life technique, and I hope those of you who brought something to take notes on will do that. And I'm going to tell you up front that a great deal of the examples that I'm going to use to illustrate how this technique works will be weight loss examples, and there are 3 reasons I'm going to use weight loss as an example. Number one, 80% of you, like 80% of every crowd I speak to, whether it's in a prison or a high school or a group like this, say they want to lose weight, and so I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to show you a complete plan that will allow you to gain the control over your eating to allow you to weigh whatever you want to. And secondly, it is so typical of the challenge we face. If you can learn how to use this technique to overcome a weight problem, then you can use this technique to overcome any area in your life that's out of control. And make no mistake, what we're talking about here is self-defeating, self-destructive behavior, and it is a matter of being out of control. I teach in the prisons of America a seminar called The Ultimate Power. If anybody needs control over themselves, it's them. And I'm going to tell you folks what the difference is between you and the folks in prison. Are you ready for this? The parts of your life that are out of control are not illegal. That's the only difference between you and the people who are behind bars. There are folks that have just as much of a problem keeping from committing what we call an illegal offense as you do from having that extra piece of strawberry shortcake. And it ends them right behind bars. In fact, they're luckier in many ways than you are. The alcoholic in Alcoholics Anonymous is luckier than most of us because their portions of their life that are out of control cause them such immeasurable grief they must be dealt with. We only get robbed of the success we could have. We only have a little less self-image than we should have. We're only a little overweight. We only suffer a little bit and put off dealing with the problem. It's so typical. This weight problem is so typical of all of the areas that are out of control in people's lives, and they're different for everyone. And the third reason is that, folks, I am an absolute expert in losing weight. You saw that embarrassing picture of me weighing 75 pounds more than I weigh today, and if you want to know the honest-to-goodness truth, if you said, Joe, quick, what is the one accomplishment in your life that you're more proud of than anything else you've ever done? I would very quickly tell you that it's this little hourglass figure. Because it was a long time getting here and it didn't come easy. And the $10 million I'd give up before I'd give up the control, the extra self-esteem, the health that I enjoy, and the fact that I can stand here having conquered a lifelong problem as a testament to the fact that no matter how tough it is, no matter how much our lower self wants it, you can beat it. Because you see, the battle is inside. That little saying, any man can conquer another man, but the one who conquers himself is the true warrior. I didn't make that up. I wish I had of. I was in some city a long time ago, and I was on a speaking circuit. We were doing 5, 6 cities a week, and I don't remember what town it was that I was in a rent-a-car, and I pulled up just as vividly as it was yesterday. I pulled up to a stop sign, and I looked to my left, and there was an old antique store. And leaned up against that antique store was an old board that someone had carved a saying in. It was so old it had turned gray. And if I live to be 150, I will never, ever forget those words. They so burned into my brain I didn't have to write them down, didn't have to memorize them, didn't even have to repeat them. Any man can conquer another man, but the one who conquers himself is the true warrior. You see, we spend so much time fighting our battles out here that we're not even on the battlefield. If your battles are with your boss and with your customers and with your situation and with your company and with your spouse and all the circumstances you find outside of you, let me tell you, you cannot win because you are not even on the battlefield where the real victory can take place. It has to be in here. And so let me tell you, if I can, what I discovered about controlling behavior. Have you ever noticed how really tough it is to control behavior by just changing behavior? All of us have on numerous January 1sts started New Year's resolutions. Like, okay, here we go, first of the year. This is the first day of the rest of my life. And all my life's over with. Doesn't make any difference what I did yesterday. Here's what I'm going to do. Brand new person. I'm going to start running 3 miles a day every day for the rest of my life. Well, I get about 90. I maybe go to 2 miles. And then 1 mile from 100 on. But right now, for the next 40 years, I'm running 3 miles a day. And it turns out to be 3, all right. But it wasn't 3 miles. It's 3 days. It's all over. Now, let me release you from all the guilt that you've been building up over that kind of behavior. It really wasn't your fault. And I'll tell you why. Because you were sitting there with an effect, trying to make it into a cause. You cannot just grab behavior and do something with it. Let me tell you what that's like. That's like being in a car that's sitting still and you decide you want to go 60 miles an hour. And so the way you decide to do that is that you break out the glass in the speedometer and grab the speedometer needle and put it up to 60. Car going to go anywhere? No. Kind of like turning on your windshield wipers to make it rain. What you've confused is cause and effect. Now, we know that if you find a way to crank that engine, put the car in gear, and push on that accelerator, That car gets to roll and that speedometer needle will go to 60 all by itself, and so will your behavior if you'll just find that it is not a cause, it is an effect. Let's find out what affects it. So here's the first step in this little puzzle. We're going to go up the chain of command and discover where our behavior comes from so we can make that change and let the chain of command end up changing our behavior effortlessly. And I really mean that, effortlessly. You see, we don't ever engage in any behavior at all unless we first think a thought. Now, the author of that wonderful little book, As a Man Thinketh, James Allen, written back in the last century, said something that I really thought was interesting. He said that people think they can keep their thoughts a secret, but they can't, because thoughts crystallize into habits, and habits solidify into circumstances. And so you see, your thoughts are so powerful in that they determine what's going to happen in your life. Nothing ever came to pass in your life that wasn't first a thought. No chair, no light, no building ever existed without it first being a thought. And then that thought manifested itself into action. The action manifested itself into circumstances. Our thoughts are so powerful. Yet we give no thought at all to trying to find a way to control what we think about, manage what I think about. If you think your companies need to be managed, if you think your budget needs to be managed, I'm here to tell you that they don't need to be managed nearly as much as your thought processes do, and your thoughts run around. You know what Plato said about the human mind? Plato said that the human mind was like a mutinous ship, where the crew had captured the captain and the navigator and locked them in their cabins, and they were taking turns at the helm, running that ship willy-nilly wherever each of them decided they wanted to go for the moment, and they were running around in circles. And he said what we must do is that we must find a way to release the captain and the navigator from their cabin, get them on the helm, put them in charge, and let one of them plot a worthwhile destination and the other one take us there. And that is absolutely what must happen. And it occurs in our thought processes. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean. Back when I was on those thousands of diets, I would fall off of those things in the very same way every time. Third day of my diet, things are going pretty good. I'm miserable. Life is barely worth living, but I've lost 1/4 pound, and I suppose things are on track. And then about 10:30 or 11 o'clock on the morning of that third day, the worst thing that could possibly happen to me happens. A full-color, three-dimensional, realistic image of a cheeseburger pops into my mind. I can see it there. I can see the pickle juice and the mustard running out of the bottom of it. Now, we all know that if I had had the ability to move that cheeseburger out of my mind and replace it with another thought, I would have not fallen off my diet that day. I'd have been right on track. See, if I can find a way to keep myself from thinking about that person that did something bad to me, I have just overcome anger. That's all there is to it. It's gone. If I can find a way to keep from thinking about those things that I'm scared of, then I've overcome fear. Our thoughts are so terribly powerful, more powerful than any of us ever imagined. But I didn't have the ability to get that cheeseburger out of my mind. Instead, I would lust after that cheeseburger. I would eat it over and over in my mind. I would dip the French fries in the ketchup. And I would slowly but surely work myself into a feeding frenzy. I mean, there's nothing worse than watching myself eat something I can't taste. And I didn't know that was destructive behavior. I didn't know I was begging myself to get off the diet. You say, well, Joe, I'll bet you at noontime you was down there eating a cheeseburger, weren't you? No, I had another one of those salads at noon. Had the cheeseburger about 2:30 that afternoon. Now, do I know what I'm talking about or what? Well, if then I want to try to gain control of my thinking process, and I understand that I don't ever do anything unless I think about it, never just woke up down at McDonald's, how can I gain control of this thought process? Well, I began to study that. I read lots of books on self-mastery, and I read a lot of Far Eastern stuff and a lot of philosophy and a lot of religion, looking for some way to gain control of my thoughts. And as I read these books, I ran into this concept called meditation. Been around a long, long time, and you can't read self-mastery books without at least running onto the topic of meditation. And reading this book, not really reading on meditation, but just, kind of seeing it as a side issue, I figured out that what meditation is the concentration of your thought on one little tiny thing to the exclusion of all other thoughts. The quieting and the stilling of the conscious mind. And I thought, that's it. That's got to be perfect practice for keeping myself from thinking thoughts I don't want to think. Because I don't want to do these things. And so if I could just not think about them, I wouldn't do them. And so I bought me a book on meditation, and I learned all about meditation. And so that first evening, I thought, I will give it a try. Now, I would like for you to do tonight, when you go to bed, the very thing I did that first night, because I want you to make the same discovery I made, and that is, you are not in control of what you think about. You are not in control of your thought process. Now, I know you speak for yourself, Joe Land. I'm in here deciding what to think. No, you're not. Let me teach you this little method, and I want you to go home, and I'm going to give you some homework. When you get home tonight, get everybody put to bed, get all the good night sit, all the kissing done, get in bed, turn the lights out, and get your covers up to your chin, and I want you to really relax, close your eyes, and I want you to start paying attention to your breath. Then, in your mind, not saying anything out loud, I want you to count your breath this way. On the inhale, say the word and. Exhale, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Then start all over again. Never go past 4. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Now, here's the hard part. I want you to so focus and concentrate so tightly on counting your breaths that you don't allow any other thought to enter your mind. Now, that should be easy because your conscious mind can only think about one thought at a time. And so if you can just keep that one thought focused on counting your breaths, then you've excluded all thoughts. And if you can do that, I reasoned, now I am now engaging in mental exercise that disciplines and trains my mind in the art of not thinking about things that I don't want to think about. And I only want you to concentrate on counting your breaths to the exclusion of any other thought for 3 minutes. That's all. That's all I ask. And there ain't no way you're going to do it. Not going to happen. Here's what will happen. It goes good to start with because it's new and interesting and you're getting right into it. Okay. And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Hey, I'm doing this. You just blew it. In meditation circles, that's called, I'm doing good, wasn't I? Can't think about how good you're doing. Okay? Let's go back. And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. And then 2 things happen simultaneously. 1, you start to get bored with that concept. And 2, you start teaching your subconscious to count for you. See, we're going to talk about habits in a little bit, and that's all a habit is. When you pass off an activity to your subconscious mind, it starts doing it for you to free your conscious mind for something that requires conscious thought. And so your subconscious is watching you count, and it's going, I can do that. Now, the next event that occurs is that some thought that you had no idea was coming into your mind, some from left field, comes into your mind, and when it does, when it goes, you can only think about one thought at a time, and so if it can get you to grab, you just forgot you were counting breaths. Oh, now, Joe, I'm not going to forget. You just wait. And you're going to find yourself over here thinking about the beach of Acapulco. That year you all went up there, and boy, I'm supposed to be counting my breaths. And you run back over here, and your subconscious is counting all right. It's going M7, and 8, and 9. Haven't quite got it down yet. So now you bring the puppy dog back and put it where it's supposed to be. And 1, and 2. And folks, the next time you realize what's happening, maybe 20, 30 seconds later, when you're over here thinking about Aunt Mildred and those wonderful cookies she used to make, and you're going, And when that happens to you, and it will happen to you, you'll realize that you are not in control of what goes on inside your mind. Not only do you not have a choice about what to think about next, it comes to you automatically, and that'll become apparent when you try to exclude all unwanted thought. They'll come, and you won't have anything to do with what comes in there. Well, we should have known we couldn't choose what comes into our mind next. We can only think about one thing at a time, and if you're busy thinking about what you're thinking about now, how are you going to think about what you're going to think about when you get through thinking about what you're thinking about now? Now, answer me that. And the other thing is, no matter what you happen to be thinking about, when one of those thoughts comes in that you didn't have anything to do with, it captures you and runs away with you. And so you are an absolute slave to whatever thought happens to come into your mind until you can rattle yourself loose from it and decide again what it is that you were supposed to be thinking about. Now, how do we overcome that? We overcome that by learning the process by which the thoughts are selected to come into our mind. And so that must be the next one. What creates thoughts? Well, you see, your subconscious feeds you thoughts. And it doesn't feed you random thoughts like it looks like it does. You have instructed it which thoughts to give to you when you came up with what you were interested in. You see, your subconscious is programmed with your interests. What's important to you? And you have two kinds of interests. You have those things that you aspire to and dream about, all those goals and wonderful things you want to have happen in the future, and every now and then your subconscious says, well, here, think about that Mercedes a little while. You go, okay, boy, I sure like that Mercedes. But there's another set of interests, and that's the negative ones. Those are the things you hope to, again, this don't happen to you, and so every now and then your subconscious says, you better worry about this a little while. Oh, I hope I don't get audited this year. Woo! We spend some time doing that. And so our subconscious keeps on feeding us those thoughts according to the priorities that we've placed in there. Perfect example is someone who has just fallen in love. Remember the last person in your office that fell in love? They were worthless for a month, were they not? May as well give them sick leave. Now here's what a person does when they fall in love. They say, attention, subconscious mind. Do you see that person over there? That's all I want to think about until further notice. And your subconscious says, you got it. And then they go around like this. Send them home. They cannot think about anything else. They are helpless. They've got to think about what the mind feeds them. So if our interests, of course, are dictated by our priorities, that's all our interests are, is a reflection of our priorities. That's what's important to us, what we want to think about. What's important to us is what we think about. Now we're almost there, folks. If behavior is a result of thoughts, and thoughts are a result of interest, and interests are a result of priorities, we're almost at the top. We're almost about to find the culprit responsible for all of our behaviors. It's what you believe. Well, of course it's what you believe. You see, your belief system is the most precious thing you own. It's your prized possession. It literally controls who you are and what you do and what you think about, and therefore what you have and the circumstances you find in your life. Your circumstances, your station in life, all the things that have happened to you and what you find yourself doing and having and being right now as a result of what you believe. There's a concept called the path of least resistance. And it simply states that everything in the world follows the path of least resistance. Wind going between buildings in a big city. Electricity going through a computer or a light bulb. Water down a river. And human behavior. In fact, I would submit that you are who and what you are today because all of your life you have followed the path of least resistance. And I don't think you can change that. I think it's a law. I think everybody will always follow the path of least resistance. Well, then I can't change. Yes, you can. You can change the path of least resistance. If I was unhappy with the direction a river was flowing, I want to build myself a shopping center in the middle of this river. I'd be foolish to try to get the water to run uphill. But all I have to do is change the structure that causes the path of least resistance, which, of course, in the case of a river, is the river bed. All I have to do is dig a new riverbed, change the direction of the path of least resistance in the direction that I want the water to flow, and then not only will the water flow in that direction, it can't keep from it because everything follows the path of least resistance. And so if there's some behavior that I desire, if I want to change what I do in certain areas of my life, then I will create a new structure in whatever causes my path of least resistance that will cause the path of least resistance to move in the direction of the behavior that I desire. Doesn't that make sense? And of course, the structure that creates your path of least resistance is your belief structure. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's imagine that Craig comes to me and he says, Joe, I'm 150 pounds overweight. And I can tell you why. It's chocolate cake. I'm a slave to chocolate cake. I can't turn this stuff down. I have to eat it. And I heard you talking about changing the path of least resistance, and I was wondering if you could somehow change my path of least resistance so that I wouldn't be a slave to chocolate cake anymore. And I said, well, let me understand, Craig, exactly what you're saying. What do you want your path of least resistance to cause you to do? He says, I want my path of least resistance to cause me, every time someone says, won't you have some cake, to say, no, thank you, I believe I'll pass on the cake. And I say, no problem, we can do that. So we meet that evening, and I have in my hand the two tools that I'll use to change Craig's path of least resistance. In this hand, fresh out of the oven, a delicious, wonderful, flaky chocolate cake. In this hand, a ball-peen hammer. Now, we will start the evening's events off by me saying, listen, Craig, why don't you go ahead and have yourself some of this chocolate cake? And Craig, of course, thinks this may be the last chocolate cake he'll ever get a chance to eat, so he says, sure, I'll have some. So he gets himself a piece of that chocolate cake and gets a fork full of that stuff and puts it in his mouth and chomps about 3 times, and I hit him right over his head with that ball-peen hammer. Boing! Well, Greg wakes up, gets up, kind of dusts the cake crumbs off of him, and a little unsteady sits back in the chair. And I say, Craig, whew, man, you're looking bad. Here, why don't you maybe have another little piece of this cake? Now, if Craig is a slow learner, he'll say, well, sure, Joe. You know, I am feeling kind of bad, and so thank you. I believe I will make myself feel better with another little bite or two of that cake. And old Craig puts another bite in his mouth and chomps a couple of 3 times, and of course, I hit him over the head again with that hammer. Now, let me promise you something. When Craig gets up this time and dusts himself off and manages to get seated back in his chair, and I say, Greg, why don't you have another bite of this chocolate cake? He's going to say, no, Joe, thank you. I believe I've had all the cake I can stand. Now, that take a lot of willpower, did it? Huh? A lot of self-discipline involved here? You have to think real hard and fight a battle within himself? No. No, we have changed this man's path of least resistance. You say, well, now, wait a minute, Joe, that's not logical, because when I eat fattening fruit, nobody's going to hit me over the head with a hammer. No, nobody hits you over the head with a hammer when you eat fattening food. It just makes you fat. It makes you feel like you have less energy. It takes years off your life. But the main thing it does is that it chips away one more time at your self-esteem, as you have to realize that you are not in control of your life and that food is more important than you are. I think I'd just soon get hit over the head with a hammer, if you don't know the truth about it. You see, the first thing we're going to have to do is get honest with ourselves about what the lower self having its way is doing to us in terms of damage. What's the toll here? What's happening? And if we really allow ourselves to see what's happening, then I think we'd find the battle a little bit easier. I've been to a lot of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I'm not an alcoholic, but I'll tell you, that's just because I don't particularly like alcohol. The fact that I'm a foodaholic lets me know exactly what those folks go through, and I would be an alcoholic if I liked alcohol nearly as much as I do food. I've been to those meetings not because I had a problem with alcohol, but because those people fascinate me. Because they're the only group of people I know of that realize where the battle is. You see, every alcoholic realizes that there are 2 of him or her. There's this side of them that wants a drink so bad they could taste it. They do anything for it. But this side of them that realizes the price that has to be paid in yet another job, in maybe yet another marriage, in another bout either in jail or the hospital. And so these 2 sides fight continually in the alcoholic. And for every recovering alcoholic, and I've got a lot of you people, God bless you, in the room tonight that can call yourselves recovering alcoholics, they've all had the same experience. They can all look back to one time, one day, some of them 1 hour and 1 minute, where they had an experience they called hitting the wall. At an AA meeting, you'll hear somebody get up and say, I drank uncontrollably, tried to stop, couldn't, for 27 years. And then on May 14th, 1987, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I hit the wall. And I haven't had a drink since. Wow. What an experience that must be. And I thought, what is this hitting the wall? Maybe I could cause that to happen in my life in all of those areas that are out of control. If I could have something that powerful happen to me, then I could gain control of everything about my life. And so I looked and I talked and I interviewed, and then it dawned on me what hitting the wall is. It's when it comes home to him that the drink is not worth the price he has to pay for it. And until that realization comes home and it becomes real to him, he'll never find a way to overcome the drink because his emotional and sensory needs for it are too strong. You see, that person just changed his path of least resistance. The alcoholic chooses between two evils. And maybe you have an area of your life that's out of control where there isn't a good choice. It's a choice between two evils. His evils are over here, he doesn't get the drink he so desperately needs, and over here is the destruction, the other marriage. His kids disrespect him a little bit more, and all the other terrible things that happen to him when he loses control. Remember this. When you face two evils, the lesser of the two evils is the path of least resistance. And when not having the drink is the lesser of the two evils, when it's worse for you, if you do take the drink and suffer the consequences, then you are on the road to recovery. And we can learn an awful lot from that. An awful lot from that. And so let me see if I can't put this knowledge into a little formula that will allow you to do what I did. In fact, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I can never give up something and then go on thinking about what I gave up. You just can't do it. You must be thinking about what you got as a result of what you gave up. And so I made myself up a brand new visual image of Joe Lamb, the way I dreamed of him being. And let me tell you that back then that was a pretty tough image to come up with. It was hard to believe because I was, well, you saw the picture. And so I dreamed of me how I wanted to be, how I desperately needed to be. I would dream of Joe Land, slim, trim, handsome, virile. Well, slim and trim anyway. So that I could see it and lust after that instead of my cheeseburger. Because I had designed a priority that became my new belief system as to what I wanted to think about, what was important to me. I then got on a program of using three little words that became magic words for me. And ladies and gentlemen, these words are going to sound so simple that many of you will not understand their power. But if you will just, based on what I tell you, go try them, you'll find out how terribly powerful they are. Every time that cheeseburger would come into my mind, I would say, I would rather. You see, when I say those three words, two things happen. I find a way to move into my higher self, and I also begin the process of notifying my subconscious mind that there's a new priority in place. Because, you see, your life is a series of decisions. Every day you make hundreds of decisions. I used to think a long time ago that I was just fickle, that I couldn't keep my mind made up. Because after supper one night when I was all full and felt terrible, I'd say, you know, I'm going to change. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to go on a diet. I'm only going to eat lettuce for the first 6 months. No, tomorrow I'm not eating anything. You ever been through those thoughts? And then the next day at noon, I could hardly tell the difference between a chicken fried steak and a piece of lettuce. And I'm thinking, what is this with me? Who am I really? And you see, I thought I was just some guy that couldn't keep his mind made up, but when I understand there are two of me, it solves the problem of understanding how that happens. You see, there's a part of me that never wants to eat properly, and a part of me that always wants to eat properly. It's not a matter of what I decide to do today. It's a matter of which of my sides I allow to make the decision. And what kind of life you lead, and what kind of school your kids go to, what kind of car you drive and what kind of neighborhood you live in, and the quality of your life will be determined more than anything else about which of you allow to make all of those decisions you make all day, every day. We all know that people making poor decisions is one of the biggest reasons for failure. You show me somebody on the bottom, I'll show you somebody that makes bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. You show me somebody who rose immediately to the top and stays there, I'll show you someone who makes good decisions upon good decisions upon good decisions. And I don't believe that most bad decisions are made as a result of carefully weighing all of the data at hand and then just trying to make up your mind and guessed wrong. I don't think that's true. I think most of the bad decisions you make that create the failures in your life are made because you make them with your lower self instead of your higher self. And let me show you a quick little test to allow you to see which of them is making a decision. When you make a decision for any reason other than your better judgment says it's the proper decision to make for the good and the best interest of all involved, you're making a decision in your lower self. And those lower self decisions come in three flavors. When you make decisions out of your desires, out of your fears, and out of your pride, that sense of self-importance that causes us to cut off our nose to spite our face, then we've stepped out of our higher self into our lower self and we're begging for trouble. And one of the first things I'd like for you to do, one of the things that helped me more than any other single thing, was to realize there are two of you and start monitoring yourself like an actor who's in a play, has the ability to step back and see how well they're playing the part. Become an observer of you. We have the ability to think, but we also have the ability to think about our thoughts. And so analyze your thoughts as you think them. Observe yourself and say, I wonder why I'm doing that. What's causing me to do that? What's the benefit I get out of making a decision that way? And if you're making that decision out of desire or out of fear or out of your sense of self-importance or pride, then step back and say, I would rather make a decision based on what I know is right. I would rather make a decision I can be proud of tomorrow. I don't need to feel good for the moment. I'd rather put together a plan and follow the plan. And if you don't say those words to yourself, no one will. And so the cheeseburger would come into my mind, and I'd say no, and I'd take the cheeseburger out of my mind, and I'd say I would rather, and I'd see me there with all those muscles rippling the way I want it to be. Notifying my subconscious, that's what I want to think about. Now, I have to tell you that the first 100 or so times I did that, the cheeseburger came back and clobbered the guy with the ripply muscles. You say, well, Joe, that didn't work. I tried that and that didn't work. No, it didn't work, and I'll tell you why. Because we had yet to teach that part of us that really controls our daily lives that a new set of priorities has been put into place, and a new belief system is now controlling the path of least resistance. You see, now you run into your habits. And ladies and gentlemen, every time you've ever tried to institute a new behavior in your life and ran smack into that brick wall that kept you from doing what you wanted to do, and you decided, you know, I don't think I can be that person, I must settle for who it is that I am. If you've decided that it's just not in your nature to do that, that there's so much resistance in you to doing that, it's just not meant for you to do that, I'm telling you that's baloney. All you did was run into your programming, and all your programming are your habits. You have inadvertently programmed your subconscious mind with your habits back when you were making decisions with your lower self, back when you were a much less mature person, back when you were living in another world. The problem is that those old programmings that are a result of those old decisions and those beliefs continue to control us today because we taught our subconscious back then what we wanted to think about, how we wanted to react, right down to anger. We taught ourselves when to get mad. You see, when you consciously do something in a certain way, in a response to a certain situation over and over and over and over again, your subconscious says, I got it. I'll feed you that thought every time that comes up. You can move on to something else. Kind of like driving a car. Remember how tough it was to drive the car when you were doing it consciously the very first time? But now that you've taught all of those integrated moves of your physical body to your subconscious mind, it's easy. In fact, you never think about it. Your subconscious has taken it over. You drive from habit. 95% of what you do, say, and think every day is habitual patterns. It's things from the past that come to control us. And not understanding enough about our minds to gain the ability to change that programming makes us a prisoner to our past beliefs, which undoubtedly always come from the lower self when decisions were made from emotions, desires, and fears, rather than our better judgment. Let's learn a little something about how habits work. The best example I can think of is a smoker. We got a smoker over at a friend's house some evening, and one of them's a Democrat and the other one's a Republican, and they're having a debate about politics. And our smoker is mid-sentence in something he's totally involved in and therefore has immersed 100% of the attention of his conscious mind in. He doesn't have time to think about anything else. He's meditating on what he's saying. And at that point, a little tiny bit of anxiety pops into his mind. Now, it pops into his subconscious mind because he doesn't notice it with his conscious mind. And so the subconscious begins now to deal with alternatives in response to this anxiety. Suicide. No, not that much anxiety. And it works its way down to smoke a cigarette. Smoke a cigarette. Now, this man's subconscious mind has just decided that he's going to smoke a cigarette. Let me point out to you that this man has just made a decision and he doesn't know it. Well, now, wait a minute, Joe. You told me that we didn't ever do anything unless we thought about it. Yeah, but I didn't say it was a conscious thought. Doesn't have to be one. In fact, most of your thoughts are unconscious. It was a conscious thought back when he first began making his habit. Because, you see, every time he had a little bit of anxiety of the kind we're talking about pop up, he would consciously, when he was developing his habit, deciding when and when not to smoke a cigarette, he would respond to that kind of anxiety at that level with a cigarette. And when you do something in response to a circumstance over and over and over and over again, your subconscious says, I got it, I'll take over. And now he decides when to smoke cigarettes unconsciously. Now this man just made a decision to take some action and doesn't know it. That's pretty scary. And so, like any other program, like a computer program, which is just a preordained set of steps that always play out the same way, the subconscious throws the smoking program into effect. Step one of the smoking program is right hand into left front shirt pocket. Now, if those cigarettes are not there, that hand may feel around in that pocket for 3 minutes. There's only 2 cubic inches in there. Anybody could have figured out long before now there are no cigarettes in this pocket. But he's talking about Bill Clinton, and that hand just keeps on floating around in there. Now, when the subconscious finally figures out that there's no cigarettes in this pocket, it goes to alternate plan. Step 1B, alternate pocket, like this. And I'll tell you another thing about Hillary. She's just, and then if it goes on far enough, he's like this. This man has no idea what he is doing. His body is looking for a cigarette. And if it goes on long enough, if the subconscious becomes satisfied that there are no cigarettes, then it'll set off an alarm to the conscious mind. Bong, 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 we are out of cigarettes. Because he has no program to go down to 7-Eleven and get more cigarettes. He has to do that consciously. Now, at the end of the evening, this man will have smoked so many cigarettes that he didn't even know he smoked. You know, the process just goes on. You go through the whatever little, procedure he's taught himself. Light up, puff, blow, ashes, put it out. At the end of the evening, he looks at his ashtray and he says, Fred, I have got to quit smoking so much. Look at this. Look at what I did all night long. Now, that's the way a habit works. And so, let me tell you that the resistance that you meet inside yourself to initiating new behavior is nothing more than running smack into your habits, which are your past decisions revisiting you. And so your subconscious treats you like you treat a little child. You are a parent, and little Bobby comes in, and says, little 3-year-old Bobby, Mommy, I run a tricycle just like Billy's, a red one. Now, what's your first response to that? Sure, son. Why do you ignore his asking for a red tricycle? Because this makes the 12th thing he's asked for today. And the other 11 you've never heard of again. And a long time ago, you learned better than to fill up his closet with things he says he wants but doesn't really want. But he can get a red tricycle from you, can he? How does he do that? Persistence. Comes back this afternoon. I can hardly wait until I get my red tricycle. Comes back in the morning. Man, we're going to drive all the way out there and all the way back. Now, red tricycle when we get them. And he comes back that afternoon. Our red tricycle being just exactly like his. And you know, at some point you go, you know, I think this little sucker wants a red tricycle. That is exactly what your subconscious mind does for you when you approach it fresh and bright that morning and say, this is a new deal. I am going to run 3 miles every morning. I'm only going to eat healthy foods, high fiber, low fat. I'm going to do just what they say to do in all those books I've been reading. I don't care what it tastes like. I'm going for health. Your subconscious goes, sure. You bet. We're doing the health thing again. Well, you give him 3 days, 4. And so you have to go on a process that I call conscious manual override, where you take control of your behavior and you show your subconscious that a new set of beliefs is in place, a new set of priorities has resulted, that you desire new thoughts because you're going to put them in there with the I would rather concept, and you are going to act out the new plan until you convince it that this is the new plan and it's here to stay. And ladies and gentlemen, if you will just do that, you'll have the exhilaration that a great number of people never really get a chance to experience. And that's the exhilaration that comes with the knowledge, the understanding, the belief, finally, that I can change. I can become anybody I want to become and do anything I want to do, and I can have anything I want to have. When we come back, I'm going to talk to you about deepening the understanding of the ultimate power so that we can use the ultimate power to gain more control of ourselves, so that not only can we have the things we want to have, we'll have the ability to enjoy them and pull all out of them we possibly can. And we will do that in about 15 minutes from right now, and I'll see you back here then. Thank you.